1-inch foam keeps the slab warm enough that if you put this carpet down on top of it, that you're not going to have mold. If you just put this carpet down on top of bare concrete that's sitting on plastic, the odds are pretty good that you're going to have some mold underneath that carpet. And we learned that on our 7th residence hall. Well, University of Minnesota came out with an extensive test, found that out, that you need to keep that slab warm. They recommend if you do not, on that basement slab, put 1-inch foam underneath it, then don't put anything except maybe ceramic tile or paint. Don't even bother with vinyl. And we kind of see that now. You have to keep that slab warm. And then they always accused us, of course, when we were building. You know, we build houses and then sell them. So we are in the real world, but you guys are just, you know, you're a school. You're not in the real world. They don't consider us even builders. But anyway, you know, what is a basement? It's a living space or a crawl space, you know, and then you end up with critters and mold if it's not done correctly. Out in Washington, I was surprised that their crawl spaces are ventilated. Here in Iowa, what you want to do is consider that crawl space just like a basement. You put plastic over the ground, come up the sides, and you insulate that with like foam, which is the safest one. You keep it warm. Why would you possibly want to have, if this is your living room floor, why would you want to possibly have cold air going underneath your floor? And putting fiberglass underneath there is not going to do anything. Because all fiberglass is, if it's not in an airtight structure, it's just a filter. And so that's where we saw a lot of issues and high utility bills under vented, uninsulated crawl spaces. If you don't insulate, there's always all kinds of things that you're going to have, you know, critters, heat loss like this. This is a brand new house that was built right next to a college house. I love this because we went out with the infrared camera. And if you ever have an infrared camera, don't take college kids with you. That's a bad thing. This shows all the heat loss. This is just an uninsulated slab on this house. The white color on this is heat loss, right? And you know, when you look at the house, you know, we're really not doing that bad on our walls. You know, we kind of goof up in the attics a little bit, and we kind of goof up where the foundation sometime maybe meets the floor. But foundations, for some reason, we just can't get past that. Oh, I don't need to insulate it because I'm not down there that much. That's a lot of heat loss. Yes?
Why is windows black?
In this particular house, probably because they're so inefficient that the warm air on the inside is making it even darker. And sometimes it kind of reads in reverse on windows. We get like a heat. If you've ever used an infrared camera, you get kind of a heat mirror kind of thing. Sometimes the windows, it kind of depends on this. You know, if they were losing a lot of heat, they should be lighter. I mean, theoretically, yeah. We have kind of issues with infrared cameras sometimes. Yes? What
would you recommend on a basement foundation wall?
I'll show you that. I'll be coming right up to that. One of the things that Minnesota also found out was that 90% of the mold issues in Minnesota were because foundations and footings had wet feet, which basically means underneath the footings of your house, the very first thing that you do, there's moisture coming up through that footing. And if you don't stop that water from transferring through that, usually 8 inches thick of concrete, if you don't stop it on the top or the bottom, it crawls right up that foundation wall. And if it's insulated on the inside and outside, it keeps right on going up till it hits your floor system. And if you've ever seen floor systems now, you know, about half the time we use these I-joists. They're just OSB, which is glued together, microwaved chunks of wood. Well, when they get wet, they swell. And once they swell, they've lost their strength. The last thing we want to do is have our floor system on the edges where they're bearing on a wall start to get soft. And so what we want to do is we want to stop this. Stop that moisture from coming up. The building codes that are going to be changing, some of them now, you have to have a drainage tile system. It depends on what kind of a building area you're in. So these are some of the new projections if they aren't already there. They want gravel or stone below the slabs, not just sand. They want free draining. Like in our area, we use a lot of limestone, clean limestone. Some areas use P-rock, or some have a real coarse sand, but something the water can go through, not just get into and it just cause kind of a mud pie effect. You have to be able to let that water go. They want the gravel to go past 1 foot past the outside of the footing. So when you have a footing, they want gravel 1 foot past it, and then it's supposed to come up and go up like, say, 18 inches or so. That's the minimum, so that we have gravel all around that footing along with a tile. And they want the tile covered with a fabric. I doubt if they're going to do that, because we're finding out that the tile that we have fabrics on, they're clogging up pretty fast. Actually, the ones without the tile or without the fabric are actually working better. If you know what kind of, like this ADS tile that has a boot or a sock around it, they're not working as good as we thought.
What about keeping dirt out of the gravel that you've got around your foundation?
Well, underneath the foundation, we always put 4 inches of gravel underneath there.
But the gravel that you pile up around the footer,
Yeah.
how do you keep dirt from filtering?
Well, you can wrap that with a filter fabric, and that comes right around, it comes over the top. That's a good point. What he's saying is, how can you keep that rock clean around that footing is you wrap it with a filter. And all these things add a little bit of money, but, you know, you either do it right or you don't do it, is what we always figure. If you don't want to build a house correctly, then go build garages. You know, you should be building for people. You know, if you're building for people to live in something, carpentry and construction is supposed to be a craft. It's not supposed to be a quick profit. Hey, I got your money, you're gone, and don't bother calling me if something's wrong. You want to build something that somebody's going to live in, raise kids in, and hopefully for at least 100 years, you should have some pride in what you do. And if you're just doing it for the quick buck, like I say, build garages, go out and pour some sidewalks for somebody, you know. Do something that's not going to affect somebody's life. This is what's happening. We see, you know, a lot of times people will pour footings down in the mud. I always love, I remember one episode of Bob Vila. I mean, I swear, he backed the truck up here and added about 50 gallons of water and goes all the way down there, and it's in mud and everything, and there's no strength. You know, how many contractors test the strength of their concrete? None, unless you got state money involved. So here's what we had. We had this water table down here, and then here's the moisture, and it travels and it goes right on up and comes out in the house. And I'm sure a lot of you have been into a basement where you see about 3 or 4 inches of that basement wall kind of damp. That's what that is. It just starts to evaporate after that. 24 hours a day, water coming into the house. And if not, it'll go straight up. So there's a lot of issues. And if you're not keeping the moisture out of the house here, then it's going to the house somewhere. And we learned a long time ago, what we did in the 70s and 80s, we'd throw some 2x4s up to insulate that basement wall. We put plastic and then 2x4s, and then we put fiberglass, and then we drywall it. We had the perfect mold breeding ground. This insulation was keeping the concrete cool, had a little bit of airspace, water went down, came across, went right up the studs and in the insulation. The worst case that I know of was a friend up in Minneapolis. They had a terrible smell in the house. They went in, kicked a hole in the drywall about this far off the floor, and dead night crawlers fell out. The whole bottom was perfect habitat for night crawlers. Now, I don't know how you raise night crawlers, but they had the perfect breeding habitat. And you have to keep an eye on your contractors. This is a house that some high school kids built. In fact, they came in after this happened. They came in when the foundation was all done. Just, you know, your normal Iowa farm kid, building trades. What happened is when this house, there was a rain, all of a sudden there's 2 feet of water in the basement. And the kids said, you know, we didn't do anything with the foundation. We built the upstairs. But since our name's on it, they came back, got a backhoe, dug the whole thing out. And you can see the waterproofing on the outside, but this had form-a-drain around this, which is a plastic kind of a form that's supposed to be your drain also, and all the water is supposed to go to the sump pit. Well, something wasn't right. The guy that waterproofed it came down and sprayed all the holes, all the intakes on the form-a-drain, so no water could possibly get to the sump pit. And these kids dug the whole thing out, and then this guy didn't believe in a dumpster either. All the trash was in there, which is illegal, but they dug all that out, put it all back, put the sod back in, and put the deck in, and no charge. These are just high school kids that had their name on it. So if you ever hear anybody beef about Iowa kids, there's an issue.
Otherwise, the form-a-drain work okay?
I don't really like form-a-drain. I think it's a waste. Actually, because most footings are 8 inches, and they sell form-a-drain 6, so then your water table's in your footing, which never made any sense to me. So just skip it. Just use your regular wood forms. You can use that wood elsewhere. You know, it's really not a waste, or it's kind of a waste. Now here's a nice poured wall. It came in and waterproofed. going to be 2 inches of foam on the exterior. It's going to be a nice insulated basement. This particular house belongs to a good friend of ours that he's a steel worker, tell by the ladder. All the steel floor, had radiant floor heat in the basement, radiant floor heat on this main slab. On the floor here, it's about 6,000 square foot house, and it's geothermal. And this thing's operating so well that almost all the time this main floor isn't even working. That envelope, he has that envelope so well done that he really is almost twice what he really needs for heating and cooling. This is really nice. I really like this system. I really like the ICFs. I wish more people were using them. Yes, they're a little bit more money. There's some hassles with covering up the outside. That's easy to take care of. This particular brand is Integra-Spec. The reason we like those is you can pour those to 8 feet high at once. You don't have to go around, 2 feet, 4 feet, 6 feet. You go to 8 feet, zip all the way around, and you're done. No blowouts. It's a real strong system, and they're very easy to drywall. This one doesn't. You can tell exactly where your drywall is going to go. You're not looking around for fasteners.
What's it called?
This one's Integra-Spec. We've tried other brands, and this particular guy that came in, he was very safety conscious too. That's what we liked. The National Association of Home Builders has some standards that for surface drainage, we want to have at least 6 inches of fall in that first 10 feet. And, new houses very seldom see that. That they're usually fairly level. We've got to be able to get back to having some fall around the house and, use some swales. Don't just have a flat yard. Put some indentations to funnel that water away or to collect it. Put a holding area in the backyard so you can use that either as a ponding area or, you can have like a little kind of a miniature swamp area with some plantings. There's so many creative things to do with natural landscaping. Get the downspouts out 5 feet. At the college, that's no way ever going to happen because, college kids running mowers, what are they going to do? They're going to run right. They're not going to get off the mower. They're going to run right over the stupid thing, and so we never have our downspouts on whenever we have a rain. We're always looking around for them as the water's coming down. Increase the floor framing distance from soil to the siding from 12 inches to 18 inches. Now, what type of housing did we have? Here's a good quiz. In the early 1900s, that we had about 18 inches from the ground to the floor. Used to order them. Sears. The old kit houses. They were high in the air. And you know what? Actually, you're only supposed to have 5 feet of soil against your foundation anyway. We normally go 6 or 7 feet, but you're only supposed to have 5. If you get that increased up to 18 inches, you have less. You're not as far in the ground. Most of the time, you're probably not going to hit that water table. It's easier to light the basement. There's no downside except getting into the house. That's the only downside. So for universal design, it's a little tougher. But for building a house that's going to have less problems with moisture, it works well.
Do you have any options to gutters and downspouts?
3-foot overhangs. Go 3-foot overhangs, get better shading, and then have your ground sloping. Yeah. I don't have gutters on mine. I wish I do a lot of times.
I don't either.
Yeah. Yes. I'm sorry.
My house is like 35 feet, 3-foot overhangs.
Yeah.
Would I need downspouts?
The question was, his house is like 35 feet, 3-foot overhangs. On our residence halls, some of them we don't. But it depends what you have down below because as that water comes down and splashes, it kind of comes over the house. Some people like a gutter with a chain instead of downspouts. The water chains actually work pretty neat. And they're pretty good looking. I actually like the looks of them. You just put chains instead of downspouts. This is what a floor usually looks like. In this particular case, it's a little bit different, but there's 2 inches of foam on the inside of the foundation wall, and there's 1 inch of foam underneath. There's a vapor barrier underneath. It's all taped and sealed. And this is that same ICF foundation. This was just a peel and stick waterproofing on the outside. I know the overdig's big. We had some issues. This was basically a sand lot that we built on. The shallow frost-free, I'll show you a couple pictures here in a second. That came originally from, it came from from Europe and Scandinavia. Then it came to Canada, and after about 30 years, the United States understood that physics is not any different than the United States than it is in Canada. So yeah, let's go ahead and